Welcome to the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast, powered by Hiscox. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. Throughout my career, I've had side hustles, some of which have turned into real businesses. But first and foremost, I'm a serial technology entrepreneur. In the creator space, we hear plenty of advice on how to hustle harder and why you can sleep when you're dead. On this show, we ask new questions in hopes of getting new answers. Questions like, how can small businesses work smarter? How do you achieve balance between work and family? How can we redefine success in our businesses so that we don't burn out after year 3? Every week, I sit down with business founders at various stages of their side hustle to small business journey. These entrepreneurs are pushing the envelope while keeping their values. Keep listening for conversation, context, and camaraderie. Today's guest is Christina Hageny, the president of Valor Payroll Solutions, an organization that streamlines the payroll process, which saves time and energy. Christina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So I'm excited to have you on because honestly, payroll is one of the most painful things for me, running a business, like having that all happen. And it's so nice to talk to somebody that, like you, actually likes doing payroll. So hopefully we'll get some tips and tricks from you about payroll and starting and running a business. But before we get into that, give us a little bit about your background and what got you to where you are today.
Sure. As far as payroll goes, I think like anybody else, you happen upon it. I don't know a child in the universe that wants to grow up and do payroll as a career. I grew up in California. It was really, really hard to get a job out of college and ended up as an admin assistant for an HR director. And she did not like payroll. So that was my first task at hand. And I just ended up sticking with it. And over in my early career, people kept trying to pull me to the HR side. I got certified in HR first and then later payroll. HR was never my jam. Payroll was it, the math, the numbers, the problems. So I've kind of run the gamut. I've been an internal payroll person. I worked with PEO, worked for a small provider. And then in 2020, I started my own company.
Awesome. So is this the first time you've done something entrepreneurial, or did you do something as a kid, or were there entrepreneurs in the family or anything else like that?
No, it's really the opposite. My parents are very old school, the climb the ladder, put your head down, the old school work ethic type. The scarcity mindset, I think, is how I would classify it now. But in 2020, I started the company. I remember telling my mom that I was going to do it. And it was over the phone, but I feel like I could hear her heart drop, and then it was immediately just a barrage of, but why? And you have a good job. And what are you going to do? And this and that. And I didn't have any answers for it at the time, but it was like, this is, thanks for your support, Mom.
It's funny because I think that statement is a common one from parents to their children when they start doing this. If you're leaving like a supposedly good job but you've got a good job, right?
Yep.
I heard that same thing. And obviously you have too. And so many other of our colleagues that are entrepreneurs have heard that as well. And it's funny because that's this mindset of, well, why would you do this if you already have a good thing going? So what was your mindset then as to why you did this when you did have supposedly a good thing going?
My story is a little bit different just in that I never, I wasn't necessarily a job hopper, but I never had like a good, solid place that I was at. And the last job I had before I started my own company, I was there almost 5 years. I truly thought it was going to be my forever job. I trusted the person I worked with. We had a good working relationship. And in 2020, it just all fell apart. And for me, I kind of gave myself a false dichotomy of like, well, do I go and do this over again and go through, putting my blood, sweat, and tears into someone else's dream, or give it a go myself? So I never wanted to do this. It was never a desire. It just, for me, felt like a necessity.
Yeah. Was this, did this all happen because of the pandemic? You mentioned 2020. Was it like pre-pandemic, post-pandemic? Like, what did that play into this whole thing?
Yeah. So in the beginning of 2020, my husband deployed, and I had, at the time, my kids were 2 years old and 4 months old. And of course, then COVID broke out. I was working a lot of hours, but also my kids had lung problems. And, at the very beginning, it was like put out as a lung issue. And so my kids couldn't go to daycare. And so I was working, not working like job, but working around the clock. I mean, I was getting up at 4 a.m. so I could get a little exercise in, so I could get some emails done before my kids got up. My kids would get up. I'd do the diapers and the breakfast and then like go do emails. And then the pictures are funny of that whole time. And in the midst of all that, I really was working probably 50 hours a week or so. And I just got into a tiff with my boss, and he wanted to do this giant project that had no necessity to it. And for the first time in 5 years, I, pushed back and said, can we prioritize projects? Because right now I just don't have the bandwidth. And, we've talked since then, and there was a giant misunderstanding. And he, now sees that I was more or less a single parent at the time, trying to make it work. So it definitely had a huge part in it, just because it really brought me to the breaking point of that whole situation.
Yeah, yeah. So then so going from that breaking point to starting a new thing, which is a whole another thing, completely, like, what, you had to be nervous about stuff. Like, how did you get over that and like that nervousness and concern about doing this? And, your spouse is not with you and you're still having to juggle it all. Like, the early days of starting a company they're not easy days.
No, I always say I move mountains. Like, if there's something in front of me, I will go the distance, do whatever it takes. I bulldoze through things. And the place I was working before I started my company was a startup. The PEO I was working at before that was a startup. So I had a lot more knowledge about how a business worked than just someone that had done payroll in a company. I had been doing sales and marketing and all sorts of other things. So I just started talking to people and asking questions. And really, I think it just takes being humble and going for it and being willing to mess up over and over and over again until it gets better.
Yeah, yeah. So you had a ton of time in payroll and HR before doing this. Was there anything that you saw and experienced during that time before launching your own thing that informed how you built this to be like, I'm going to be different because I've seen how these things are and they're not good in some way, shape, or form? And what are those things that you did differently?
I think with payroll, the branding and the marketing from most payroll companies is, we're going to make this easy. We're going to make this easy. And it's not easy. And I really want to change the narrative about payroll. It's not easy. It doesn't matter what tools you have, what system you have. There's a very human element to that. And for me personally, I saw a lot of small businesses were more or less ignored by most of the payroll companies. And, of course, the bigger companies are the bigger revenue, and that's what everyone's going after. But I chose to focus on small business owners and being more high service and consultative, and not just there to answer questions, but to really be a partner to them. And, oh, there's something, they didn't necessarily ask me something, but I see them trying to do something that's not compliant. And so, then we have the opportunity, because of the way that we work with them, to see it and to intervene and to, maybe stop it, maybe not. That's up to them, but we can at least let them know, hey, this is not the way that this should be done.
Yeah. Do you feel like that has changed like the profile of people that you would have gotten as clients versus had you not done it that way?
Absolutely. I think that we have over the past 5 years kind of built a name for being fixers. So I don't know if that's good or bad because we kind of fill a space. If you have a payroll error, it's someone's fault, but oftentimes, your payroll company messes up, you change. Well, the old payroll company is not going to fix it. The new one's not going to fix it. You don't know how to fix it. So we just kind of got into the middle there. And a lot of our clients have come to us. First, we fix something, then we bring them on as a client and, handle moving forward. So it's been an adventure. We've seen a lot of crazy things. And yeah, I was just having a team meeting yesterday, and both of the ladies on my team were like, man, I have learned so much since working here, and they've been doing payroll for a long time, but we're in it. We're researching. We've got mostly people that don't know anything about payroll. We're in almost every state, and we've got, agriculture, churches, nonprofits, you name it, military spouses. So we definitely have a unique mix of people that I think we are able to provide a lot of value to.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about this and you really cut across different industries and verticals. Do you find that that's helpful or more of a challenge? Because like agriculture, the way you do payroll and the way people are getting paid is very different than a church. Like, how do you deal with that? I mean, part of me is like, maybe that's a lot of fun because as an entrepreneur, you get to learn about all these industries, but I don't know how that translates into the business.
I mean, from a business perspective, it's probably not the wisest to do or to have done. There, of course, there's the saying, right? There's riches in the niches. Um, but throughout my payroll career, personally, I always was experiencing that breadth of clients. But I think the real challenge has been when I hire, because that's unique and not many people, even if they're certified, even if they've been doing payroll for 10 years or as a service provider, they don't have that same level of knowledge. But I'm always happy to train as long as the person wants to learn. So we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of conversations. We really like proving AI wrong. We use it as a tool, but we'll ask you where it got it from, go look at it, and then have conversations with AI, which is strange, but like, what about this? So, I think with my team, after about a year, they're superheroes,
Yeah.
and I think the same of myself, that I know more about payroll than maybe not anybody, but the vast majority of payroll professionals.
Yeah. Let's talk about, you touched on a little bit, let's talk about scaling and kind of the challenges that you faced, because you're right. The profile of people that you need, you can't just pick up some random person that knows how to run payroll to plug in if they're going to have to work across industries like this.
Yeah.
So talk about some of those challenges, those early challenges in scaling Valor, and how did you get through them for yourself?
Do you want me to cry right now?
There is crying in entrepreneurship. That's absolutely true. And it's fine. It might not be in baseball, but there is in entrepreneurship.
Oh, that's fair. So, I mean, hiring in general, I think, is most entrepreneurs' biggest challenge. Once you get to that point, how do you do that? For me, it was definitely also a challenge internally. We have had turnover. I've had to work with coaches and read books and join mastermind groups and trial and error. And that honestly, it feels awful. Like, that this is someone else's livelihood and you're doing the best you can, but you're still doing this for the first time and figuring it out yourself. So, when it comes to scaling, it was, who do I hire? How do I find them? What do I pay them? How do I train them? My team is remote. So, I don't do anything the easy way, apparently. The list could go on and on. Honestly, there was no easy way about scaling. And then, of course, I think one thing that we face that other businesses face is you get to a good place on your own. Then you start adding people, and then you keep growing the business, but then you keep having to add people, and you're like, wait. The math ain't mathing anymore. We've grown, we've tripled in size, but my net hasn't tripled. So,
right.
I think growth in general is challenging no matter how you slice it.
Yeah. So how have you thought about that? That's an interesting kind of aspect of it. So you started with presumably only you, right?
Yes.
And then have grown this business over 5 years. So where are you at in terms of people? And like, is this enough? Are you not going to try to grow anymore? Or are you going to try to keep growing? Because like you said, like, well, that's not necessarily growing profits at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, it just stair steps, right? So you get there, but you realize the enormity of the task at hand. For us, right now I have 2 people working with me internally, but when I started, I was not only the payroll person and the business owner, but I was also the salesperson, the marketing person, the website person, you name it. I was taking my own photos. I mean, it was a one-woman show, legitimately. So the way that I did it was I actually started with Upwork, like in 2020 while I was still employed, built my profile there, used that money to buy software, buy computers, buy whatever, get the business going. So I was never in the red. And then as I started getting projects, getting clients, each time that I had enough revenue, I would give it away to someone. I hired a blog writer, I hired an SEO person, I hired a marketing person. So most of my first kind of hires were 1099 freelancers. But now I have 2 people internally. We have most things covered. So now my goal is sales and marketing is mine, trying to give as much of the other things away as I can. And as far as growth goes, it's, we don't have any end in sight. That's the beauty of it. We don't have a physical office space that we're going to outgrow. We could continue indefinitely. So we continue to move at a pretty good clip, and we only do inbound marketing. And I just plan to continue that and see how far it can take us.
Yeah. It's interesting, your approach there in the early days of using and leveraging Upwork to bootstrap the business. Like looking back at that, now that it's been many years, is there anything that you would have done differently in terms of that early decision and starting point for the company?
I have no idea why, but in my head, a loan was like bad. And thinking back, had I just taken out a small loan and used it to fund like a marketing person and just get the clients in faster, I think that would have really accelerated the growth. But I was like determined that I wasn't going to take out loans and I wasn't going to be negative. And I don't know why. I did the same thing in college. I worked 3 jobs and had no fun. And then later learned that you could take out loans like to not do that. So, yeah. And now loans are not bad. I think as long as you have a solid business plan and, a service that is needed, I think you are okay. Just get the money, put it in the business and get going faster.
Well, it's interesting because even the way you talked about it, you said, I was never in the red. It was always profitable from the beginning. And so even though you say like, hey, it's okay to be, you still kind of, you tell the story with that same mindset of always be in the black, which I think it's a fine mindset to have, especially when you're somebody that's running payroll because you're a finance person. And it's kind of, we kind of expect that from folks in finance, right? Like, don't over leverage, don't do things like that. Has that been something that you've now looked at? Have you taken loans? Have you done anything like that to leverage up the business now?
We haven't yet, but it's definitely not out of the question in the future. If we were to do like a major software upgrade or something like that, I definitely would not be adverse to doing something like that. But of course, now we have recurring revenue every month. So it's a very different story
Right.
where I can, budget and forecast and fit that in pretty easily. So.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about something you actually touched on a little bit ago, waking up at 4 a.m. and being able to work out and stuff. Talk to me about kind of the balance that you try to play with like health and wellness and running the business, and then also having kids and all the other things in life. Like, how do you think about these things and how do you try to make sure that they all fit in?
I think balance is out of the question if you are running a business. And then if you add on that you want to be healthy, want to have family, all those things, like balance is not a thing. You basically become a martyr for all the things that you care about because, and I mean, it's a choice, right? I'm not a victim. It's a choice. And I could choose to not go work out. I could choose to not make it to every school event with my kids. But I don't, I choose the opposite. So unfortunately, I still wake up at 4:45 in the morning. I go to the gym by 5:30 so I can get back, get the kids, get them ready, get them to school. It's pretty much just around the clock commitment. And, I think when you're building something, it's the sweat equity, right? It's what everyone talks about. And I'm not just building the business. I'm building a family, raising children, building my body. Like it's all different undertakings that require maximum effort every day.
Yeah. So let's talk about boundaries then too, because, building a business, you talked about being a martyr, like it can bleed into every part of life, right? Like there can be client emergencies all the time and everything. How do you set boundaries for yourself? And how do you make sure that they don't bleed into other parts of life and keep yourself sane and happy with this decision to go into this thing? Was sane and happy too much of a reach? Maybe sane and happy is too far.
I don't. I'm trying to be better. Like I said, I read the books, I hear the people, I do the things. And that is a big one that is, it's out there. Set your boundaries. Don't do this and don't read your email first thing but it's all the things that everyone does naturally. And I think you just have to, it's like a seed that gets planted. Like it gets planted and then you have to suffer with it for long enough that you're like, you know what? I think there's something to be said about that thing they call boundaries. So I just recently started trying to have boundaries, to where if I get an email at 6 p.m., like I'm not writing you back unless it is a dire emergency. And then I can't help myself. But that wasn't always the case. Everything was not that it was an emergency, but I wanted to be the best. I wanted to give that high level of service. I wanted, I think it goes, I used waitress. And so just getting that instant kind of gratification, dopamine hit of, someone emails you at a crazy hour and you happen to write them back and they're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I was up at night worrying about that. And so you get that little dopamine hit of being the hero, being the, and there's a trade-off for that. And it's the sanity and happiness that I'm lacking, but it's a work in progress. I'm working on it.
Yeah. I imagine probably early days, clients had your phone number. Did you get calls and texts at all times of the day and night? And then how did you transition away, or have you transitioned away from having clients being able to call you, directly?
Yeah, from the start, I did set up Google Voice, which was not great. And now we have Ring Central. So even though it rings on my phone, it is very clearly a work call versus a personal call. So, just again, being remote, that was kind of a necessity, and coming from a remote environment as well. I knew that was one of the things I knew I kind of had to set up for my business. So luckily from the start, I had it there. I didn't necessarily use it. And every once in a while, someone somehow got my personal phone number, and that's usually a mistake. Try and steer clear of that. But, just the everything comes to your cell phone, but at least you can tell what's what and decide what you do or don't want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I got a last couple of questions for you. We talked about kind of that regret around loans and going the Upwork way and making it harder on yourself. Is there anything else though that you would go back in time and do differently now that you know what you know now, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think it's hard to say that, right? Because I think you have to go through some of the pain and the trial and error to come up with the solutions. But I know I got, I don't want to say lucky, but through some things that I did, I had a lot of opportunities presented. I started talking to people, talked to someone else in the payroll industry named Matt Vady. He said, "You should come to IPPA." I said, "I don't even know what that is, but I'll be there." So I went to IPPA and I got recruited for a leadership group. And they were like, "Yeah, just come try it out. Try it out once for free." I was like, "I don't know what that is, but I'll be there." So I joined this group, and it was my payroll dads, I call them now, and reading books and really learning about leadership and people and managing people. And, I think all of those skills that I was lacking, had I tried to invest in those earlier, I could have, made earlier progress. But again, it's just the natural progression. You don't know how bad you are at something till you go through a few people and realize, it's not them. Like, you hired poorly or you didn't train well, or so again, just being humble, but trying to learn those internal, like personal uh, things that I have learned along the way sooner would have definitely helped.
Yeah. You reminded me of something I wanted to ask you before, and hopefully you have a tip for some of our listeners. Having a fully remote team, and you've talked about this a little bit about, hiring and then having to let people go because maybe they're the right fit or whatever it is. And you've got this specific niche of like, you need somebody that's kind of a Jack or Jill of all trades because they need to be good across things. Is there anything that you do in the hiring process that you have figured out over time that really gets you that perfect, 5-star person to join the team?
In that leadership group, there's a big focus on developing your mission and mindsets, and like your true mission, not this grokked 3-sentence, whatever, but like, why are you really here as a business? And then what are the core values of the people that will be successful on your team? And I think a lot of people make the same mistake where they're hiring for the hard skills, like, can you do payroll? Do you know what FICA tax is? Blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it was really more, are you a figure it outer? The mindset of these people. And then, of course, they still have to know how to do payroll. But I can take someone with the right mindset and train them on payroll, or, take someone with less payroll experience that's a good fit mindset wise. And that was a completely new thing that I had to learn. But once I figured that out and implemented it, things got better. The other thing is with, interview questions. So many people will look them up online, but it's not what you're asking. It's what are you looking for in their answer? So, you ask these questions, you get answers. And if they're hard skill questions, those are pretty simple. But, if there was an all-star award for payroll, what would put you in it? Now, what am I, I'm looking at their body language. Are they highlighting what they did or how they helped someone else? Or, just there's a lot that goes into it. So just kind of really digging into the psychology of the person more so than those hard skills.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Okay. Christina, last question for you. If you were talking to somebody that's thinking about making that same leap like you did, and launching either a side hustle or a full-time business, what advice would you give to them?
I would say you are in for a long ride. And if, buckle up, but go for it. Because especially in today's world, gig economy, it's not that hard anymore to replace a decent salary with something on your own. Now, scaling it to a multi-million-dollar company, that's a whole other story. But I think in today's age, everyone has the opportunity to go out and do their own thing and be relatively successful, at least replace their current income. And it is a life-altering experience, just like having kids, right? It's its own thing. There's no words. You'll never understand it unless you do it. And even if you ultimately fail at it, you will change as a person.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. This has been fantastic, Christina. Where can our listeners find and connect with you online?
You can find us online at valorpayrollsolutions.com. We're also on everything, TikTok, Instagram, everything but Twitter or X. That tells you, right?
I still call it Twitter too. It's okay. Thanks so much for being on today, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast powered by Hiscox. To learn more about how Hiscox can help protect your small business through intelligent insurance solutions, visit hiscox.com. That's HISCOX.com. And if you have a story you want to hear on this podcast, please visit hiscox.com/share your story. I'm your host, Sanjay Parikh. You can find out more about me at my website, sanjayparikh.com.